Hi, I'm Jenn McNamara, Vice President of Breakaway Games and Director of the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge. I welcome you to our 15th anniversary retrospective event. Now, 2020 was set to be our 15th annual Serious Games Showcase and Challenge. And for well over a year, our planning committee had been strategizing special focus activities that would highlight the incredible growth in the creation, adoption, and success of learning and assessment games, specifically focusing on those promoted through the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge events and our community. We looked back on our 10th anniversary event for inspiration and have been planning new and different concepts for 2020. We were even designing a mascot and brainstorming special recognitions to highlight in addition to holding our standard Showcase and Challenge. Given uncertainties surrounding COVID-19, the ultimate cancellation of the vIITSEC conference, which is our event home, and planning of the first vIITSEC event, our leadership team, led by the folks you see pictured here, made the decision to take a pause from presenting a Showcase and Challenge in 2020. And instead, decided to focus on the 15th anniversary of the event to highlight meaningful trends experienced across the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge's history, marking key evolution points based upon the serious learning games submitted to us and recognized as finalists and winners across the last decade and a half. Our goal is simple: to anticipate the future by reflecting retrospectively on how we got to where we are today. So let's go ahead and look way back at our beginnings in 2006. I've invited two members of the core team that conceived of the event to share a little history with us. Let's start with asking them a simple question. Why? Why was the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge founded in 2006?
The goals really were advocacy and awareness of the power of serious games. It wasn't well known. I mean, I was fortunate to be able to talk serious games with some very influential people within the space, namely, Dr. Conkey, Dr. Smith, Dr. Woodman. I had met Jenn McNamara and yourself, Perry McDowell, and talked to you guys about all of this, and Elaine Rayburn, and a whole host of different people that I just don't have enough time to be able to list all of them. But all of you had different value streams that you saw within the serious games space. And yet, one of the common themes that always came out of it was, is trying to break into that training space with the use of games and to get it accepted. And that's where I was able to just to see that this was an opportunity that we couldn't pass up. That making people more aware and truly advocating for this was the right approach.
Kent Gritton, he came into my office one day. I was working with Curtis Conkey, and we're all at NavAir at the time. And Kent came in and said he was challenged to introduce the concept of serious games to the vIITSEC conference, and they wanted to find a way to do it without building a conference within a conference inside vIITSEC. So Curtis and I had just come back from the Game Developer Conference, and at the Game Developer Conference they have this idea of the Independent Games Festival. At the Independent Games Festival, people present and submit independent games that were not built by publishers, and they are in a kind of a competition to have the best game there. And I looked at Curtis, and we both kind of had this idea at the same time, like, why don't we do the IGF but for serious games? And so we started talking about it, and we wanted to have this kind of challenge to the community to build things, and maybe there'd be prizes. And in fact, the first year there was a $20,000 prize, and that was the last year we did any kind of cash prize for the challenge. But the challenge part was there, But what we were really interested in was the showcase, which is why it's the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge. Our goal was to not build a conference in a conference and find some way to bring interest and notoriety to serious games within the ITSEC community.
And what would you say the biggest challenge you faced in trying to start up the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge was? Were people open and receptive and ready for the event, or were you met with a different climate when this was initially proposed?
It's a little bit difficult to get the buy-off on that because not everybody was truly understanding of the power of serious games. But over the course of the year, we were able to bring them around, and as a result, it went off very well in the first year, and it's just continued to grow.
At that time, mid-2000s, much of the discourse on serious games was running from two channels: game evangelists sharing what will, would, could, or should benefit end users, and the science of learning researchers theorizing all the reasons games would naturally lend themselves to supporting learning. So at the start of the challenge, the first major task was to define a serious game. Generally, serious games offer new play-based experiences that utilize a combination of entertainment game elements, including a game world, characters, story, mechanics, rules, challenge and risk, progressive levels, collaboration or competition, simulations, scoring systems, all directed towards a serious application, or put more simply, game technology and design leveraged in an interactive experience for purposes beyond entertainment. And for the purposes of our challenge, we decided to highlight games with learning and assessment outcomes as their core. More precisely, we define a serious game as including the following criteria. A serious game must have clearly defined, measurable learning objectives, provide players with a clear challenge or problem, use gameplay dynamics and/or technologies, and provide players with positive and negative feedback with respect to that progress towards their learning objectives and game challenges. Now, obviously, games have many applications, and the educational, training, and assessment games in the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge are just one category of the broader serious games market. But given our goals, this is where we initially focused and remain focused today. At times, some of these other applications combine with learning and are also represented at our event. Once the focus and intentions to host both a showcase and challenge were clear, the 2006 SGS&C was open for submissions. I'm going to share some of the trends we've seen across the SGS&C between then and now. First focused on development methods and engines, then end user hardware, and finally, the serious game design trends shaped by both. But before we get to that, let's first talk with some of our participants once again, this time about the value of the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge for different types of participants. Can you share your thoughts?
That every company has some sort of serious games part to it now. There's not that, what is serious games? Or even companies that are just like, we do serious games and that's it. There's a few of those, but it's now a part of, Lockheed Martin. It's a part of any of these large SAIC, Leidos, anybody who is in this space, they have a division that's working on serious games now.
It's awareness and advocacy, but it's becoming awareness of all that the serious game, and not just that serious games has a place within the training potential, and it's all of the different ways within which you can use games in gaming technology to advance training objectives.
At the beginning, it was more like, hey, look, games should be taken serious. Games are something that can happen. This was a long time ago, so I think even Tickum Gaming might not have been a thing when we first started. So it's been a real long experience getting games from the beginning into where we are today. So I think absolutely the goals are changing. I think that um, the idea of showcasing that games exist is not really what what the challenge is about anymore. I think people know games exist, so now it's more about how do we go from the games that we have now to games that really expand the reach and scope of what could be games in our space.
I think the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge at ITSEC and the serious games industry in general have been really helpful in giving a kind of focal point, a space to check to see sort of what's happened in the last year, what is about to happen. I think one of the important things in this domain is to make sure that the work that's being done is quite visible. I think it's often easy for people who are just getting into the industry, in serious games in particular, to think that some of the work that they've done is sort of like the first of its kind. And I think that what we need are versions of repositories, awards, like the Serious Games Showcase, to help people recognize that some of this work has been done before and to grow the industry through understanding what is success and also sharing some of our failures. I've never been shy about sharing some of the mistakes that I've made in serious games, and I think it's important that others do that. So having this sort of community, having this annual showcase, I think is a good way to gather sort of like-minded individuals to essentially offer observations and share their successes.
We always say if you're one of the finalists that we consider you a winner. Just being a finalist is as if you had won. And I think that that's true because it does give you a lot of exposure at the conference, and it had like a lot of people come to see the entries, and we have had a lot of people move on from there to actually like get contracts and continue in the space.
Virtual Heroes has been sponsored for quite a while for Serious Games Showcase. I really think it's one of the premier opportunity for a lot of organizations to get the content that they've been developing out in front of every leader in the DoD space that's participating in the ITSEC conference. I think has really driven a lot of thought leaders and decision makers into the showcase area. And so regardless of where it is on the show floor nowadays, I think most everybody that's been to ITSEC, by the time they've been to ITSEC 1 year, they know about the showcase. They know, okay, I'm going to try to look at as many booths as I can, while I'm at the conference, but I'm definitely going to at least make a pass through this area of just, massive creativity. People get an opportunity to be exposed to. We've submitted to the Serious Game Showcase in the past. We've won, come in second or lost some other times too. But I think it's really benefited in connectivity with the community of universities and companies and even in customers that are interested in pushing the state of the art in virtual training and simulation. You see a lot of companies that consistently year after year are really leaning forward, are really working to come up with an approach or a solution for a customer that can then get funded and then demonstrate that capability.
If you're unfamiliar with the challenge, here's a very quick intro. Since 2006, the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge has been held annually as part of ITSEC. It's established itself as the premier venue for recognition of excellence in the field of serious learning and assessment game development, and brings awareness of the impact that games have on learning by providing quality exemplars to amplify the serious application of games. During the annual showcase, conference attendees visit our booth to experience our finalists' amazing learning games firsthand, network with our finalists, and cast their vote for their favorite game, and then attend our award ceremony to learn which of our finalist games take home awards. But as we all know, all of our finalists are already winners. That's the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge in a nutshell. Now let's get back to talking about the trends we've seen across the years. The learning game applications submitted in the early years of the challenge were largely provided by early adopters and researchers. Typically, they were custom developed to meet a specific organization's goals. And regardless of whether they were built with custom tools or game engines like Unreal or Gamebryo, the development software required reasonably specialized skill sets to employ it effectively. On the business side, these were all custom sales. Then a small number of proprietary or customized engines surfaced, making development a little more efficient, but still custom, and still accompanied by a custom price tag for the end user. At the same time, lighter, non-3D games started to show up, built using tools like Flash. And end users began to desire an ability to perform their own content maintenance, not wanting to be tethered to a developer, and momentum started shifting to end users wanting self-development options. We saw customization tools become available as end users demanded more control over their own content. These still worked with proprietary and domain-specific engines and tool sets, but they provided the customer a sense of control. And on the end user business side, options for license-based sales were introduced, supporting a do-it-yourself, in-house, tool-driven model. But ultimately, the customers rarely brought the development and maintenance in-house. Then perhaps the biggest shift in development technology was marked by the availability of lighter and easier to use industry-standard game engines. In parallel, the government was investing in creation of its own engines in an attempt to make the technology open source. But at the end of the day, we saw a majority of the games being developed on industry-standard, commercial off-the-shelf tools, like Unity 3D. Depending on the organization, some had brought development in-house, others were still buying custom-developed game solutions. And at this time, another market segment started to grow increasingly prevalent. Training needs targeted, commercial off-the-shelf games for sale. These addressed more generic and broad-reaching learning needs. What do you see as the most profound effects of the development technology evolution across the past 15 years on serious games?
So I actually think that the development of game engines and the increase in indie production, indie game production, has really done a good job of allowing a variety of people to create simulations that are effective, and also to dabble in the space of a variety of sort of serious games domains. So everything from social impact games to empathy games to even adver games. And I think that sort of adoption and experimentation, while it's obviously produced more content, I think it's also done a good job of encouraging people to understand how they work, to become more critical media consumers in the game space, and also to understand the potential for the medium, to understand how we could, for example, produce even more effective work. It's essentially made serious game design more approachable, more, I think, accessible to a variety of designers and developers with a variety of budgets. And I think that's one of the more powerful things that have happened, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years. So what I think is a strength in diversifying game engines is it actually changes the kinds of simulations we make. So for many years, the sort of standard was to produce something that was, a sort of 3D product. And I think there are situations where a 2D solution is quite approachable and I think appropriate, especially when we're talking about mobile devices or we're trying to give people a serious game that may only last a few minutes. And we don't want them to invest in understanding how to navigate a 3D world or to perceiving the complexities of a 3D world. So generally, I think one of the most interesting things that occurred in the recent history around game engines is the variety of game engines.
Alongside the trends in development technologies, an evolution in end-user hardware took place. In the early days, remember, we were moving from battle lab-based exercises with a control group white cell governing the actions and injects of the entire simulation experience. We started to see games deployed on higher-end gaming PCs, requiring local installation, high-end graphics cards, and game peripherals like controllers and headsets were prevalent. They were often located in research or training labs. You couldn't just sit down at your desk and pull up your game. You had to go schedule time or work with a group to be able to experience a learning game. And then eventually we saw them provided to select end users in their own workspace. So we'll start here with an end user requiring specialized advanced gaming hardware and involvement in game installation and troubleshooting. which was all part of the end user experience early on. And then we moved towards having web-based games which relied upon plugins and still required a pretty beefy computer system, to then becoming browser-based, running without additional downloads or plugins, and relying less on sophisticated graphics processors and gaming-specific hardware. And alongside this, we started to see the emergence of mobile and app-based games, providing the ability for games to become more accessible to a broader population of people in need of training, and on demand, where learners could find the time to engage with content. Currently, we're seeing an emergence interest in utilizing XR, virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, all of these different hardware sets to provide immersive learning experiences while maintaining as thin a need as possible on the end user's computers. And of course, as one would expect, all of these development platform and end user hardware environments ultimately shaped the style of the game design underlying serious games across the past 15 years. This is what we're going to talk about next. So what is it about games? Why games?
It's the power of involvement. If you think back, I mean, and it's been stated multiple different ways in the teaching communities, but Benjamin Franklin, I think, summed it up best. If you tell me, I will forget. If you teach me, I may remember. But if you involve me, I will learn. And that's what the power of the game is. It's the involvement aspect where you are actually doing the task that is assigned. And through that repetition of doing the task within that virtual environment and achieving the goals that are set out within that game, you are learning and you are retaining. And so it's from an ability to not only get the learning value out of it, but it's the retention and the proficiency of that learning value that comes from being able to have hands-on within the serious game.
15 years is certainly a long time when you're talking about technology developments, and we saw huge shifts in the power of computers, internet bandwidth, mobile devices, and XR. As the tech evolved, customers in the learning game space started shifting their demands, and game designers rose to the challenge, evolving the gameplay offered. In the beginning, we largely saw simulations. In fact, in 2006, we entirely saw strategic level and first-person simulations that leveraged game engines and hardware as developers began exploring the repurposing of games as training. From there, we spent a few years largely seeing people push the graphics capabilities of game engines as far as they could. Still, they were focused on leveraging them for simulation, and then along came a few virtual worlds. Additionally, we started seeing a trend that continues in the challenge today. Our student entries seem to take risks. They incorporate more game elements like narrative and core mechanics, and UX elements more reflective of the game genres that they're leveraging for their serious uses than we see our corporate developers willing to take. Next, we started seeing early emergence of a lighter game-inspired style. Employing more simple and fun graphics, some games even used humor, like I Am Lonely, which built romantic lives for frogs in a biological matching game. Not surprisingly, the lighter, more game-like entries primarily targeted middle and high school students. But often, we still found educational games that mixed gameplay with breaks for learning, the chocolate on broccoli model, to allow advancement in the game. Interestingly, at this time, we also saw DAU introduce a lighter graphic style on the government side, and that was pretty early compared to what most of the government games were at that time. We see that demonstrated here with procurement fraud. In 2010, we started to see games being used outside of the traditional defense, healthcare, and education spaces. Pharma came along with virtual walking the pens. More complex gameplay also emerged in educational games. We started to see coupling of games with textbooks by publishers. Tycoon brilliantly targeted getting middle and high schoolers to understand and start to think about career options, preparation, and seeing how different careers could lead to different ways of life. By 2011, the acceptance of true gameplay by some subsets of end users was becoming clear. While a majority of defense programs were still highly simulation-centric, the other segments were relying increasingly on gameplay. ADL brought us Vocabulary Challenge, and Northrop Grumman entered Quality Room, demonstrating additional growth potential for lighter games for defense, and even an opportunity to put casual mechanics to use in quiz and puzzle concepts for defense training. On the heavier side, Aeromedic Sky 1 coupled wearable biofeedback-driven breath control mini-games to train self-management for performance under the stress of medical tasks. And Fold It brought the ideas of crowdsourcing gaming research and solutions to hard problems. Additionally, mobile games brought us lighter gameplay versus more traditional simulation. In 2012, we reached a huge milestone. We had more games from other genres than simulation games, with applications for psychological and emotional resilience coming into play with games that taught through experience and biofeedback versus explicit lecture. We also saw the emergence of a complete game-based curriculum for math versus one where the games were just added into traditional classroom strategies in the Dragon Box series. Movers and Shakers required cooperative versus competitive gameplay as a multiplayer mobile game. 2013 was marked by several games that targeted real-world outcomes as their success metrics. Macbeth did extensive research to reduce impact of cognitive bias. Formulation Type Matters set a sales target goal as its measurable outcome for people who went through the game. And Playing the White Card game allowed users to earn competency units towards real-world certification. We also saw unique narrative-driven models that inspired end learners to view the world through a different perspective than their own and learn through experience. 2014 saw a neurocognitive theory-based training game for reasoning and problem solving in information-rich environments, and a critical thinking trainer for leadership skills from two different developers, both based upon sound theories and both set in fantasy settings. The trend of targeting difficult concepts like human trafficking awareness among middle and high schoolers and critical development of understanding of marginalized populations experience through narrative-driven perspective taking in Czechoslovakia also became increasingly more prevalent. 2015 saw novel use of games in the medical space, with HealthX, a lazy eye trainer that used a 2.5D shooter, Prep AR, a mobile AR application for first aid training that allowed you to print markers to superimpose augmented reality injuries on real people, and Crash Cart, an incredibly simple and effective approach to training critical crash cart inventory layout to allow immediate recall when items are necessary in real-world situations. Talking about targeting real-world results, we had a policy change game lobbying for paid sick leave for low-wage earners in the restaurant industry through allowing the player to experience how much a sick worker can spread illness in a population when left with no choice but to work while sick and unsavory. 2016 saw two incredibly unique game applications addressing the same problem, one targeting high-end prosthetics and one more accessible prosthetics. Adapt MP games provide the opportunity for an upper limb amputee to practice the muscle activations necessary to control their prosthetic device. Limitless training games use the same hardware that's inside the prosthetic to send messages to their games. These both prepare recipients of the prosthetics to use them prior to the final units being built for them, which would decrease the likelihood of abandonment. An incredibly well-designed mobile application for teaching chemistry took the spotlight, leveraging the features of the device incredibly well. U.S. Army STARS Elements. On the medical training and assessment side, the USC Standard Patient brought training and assessment of physician interview skills to life, scored by an AI-driven system that matched human raters with 98% accuracy. And the NBCOT Navigator demonstrated a full-scale competency platform using games and simulations for earning continuing competency credits necessary for maintaining certification in occupational therapy, and those credits are duly accepted by a large percentage of state-based accrediting boards. 2017 was the first year we had XR entries in the challenge. an experience-based zero-gravity trainer for the International Space Station, a VR sandbox for robotics, and a medical training environment. Most applications at this point were highly effective and immersive, experiential, versus incorporating any real gameplay elements. Bionautica Trails utilized a treadmill, wearable sensors, and a large screen for immersive game responsive cardiac fitness training and rehabilitation that provides a biometrically driven interactive experience designed to engage patients during treatment by a combination of immersive game mechanics, stunning visuals, and compelling narrative. 2018 saw increased gameplay in VR with HoloLab Champions. Interesting peripherals, including a hang glider canopy for practicing parachute descent procedures, and Dental Madness, which used models of teeth and dental instruments, marked and tracked inside the VR environment to teach dental procedures, while Code of Aegis taught programming in-game in a wonderful narrative-driven experience that could be ported out to control a robot in real life. 2019 continued to see maturation of the XR concepts brought to the challenge, with a VR game for vestibular rehabilitation and a cooperative game which placed one teammate in VR and another outside on a tablet, without a shared perspective to force teamwork and replicate real-world remote work settings. Peripherals were hot once again, with a balance board integrated with gameplay to offer physical therapy support and a lightweight driving simulator for teaching driving skills safely. Drone Fisher uniquely utilized verbal input in a simple game, less about the content being trained and specific agent behavior, and instead focused on learning to collaborate with autonomous agents to complete a task. Project Azrael finally got brain training right, based in a fun, engaging, and rigorous first-person and third-person shooter video game. It targets fluid intelligence, examining multiple executive functions, including working memory updating, mental set switching, and attentional inhibition. We say it every year, but reflecting over the finalists, over the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge history, I must say they really are an amazing set of best-in-class examples that demonstrate the overall trends in serious games. In the beginning, our entries were largely simulations and slowly transitioned to include virtual worlds and slowly more a few notable games. Over the course of the challenge, and through the games I shared with you here, we witnessed the evolution from heavy first-person shooter and strategy games exclusively to incorporating casual games and mobile, single-click, single-touch-based games, to land in the current place where most games utilize extensive narrative-based experience and even simulations are now gamified and embed rich story underlying them. We have such a mix of rich 2D and 3D platforms, casual games, immersive games. In this presentation, I only touched on a small subset of our finalist games that demonstrated specific trends of interest. Please visit our website to check out all the prior finalists. They should all be celebrated. I can't wait to hear some of the panelists' favorite games and key evolution points in gameplay. What trends in game evolution have you seen? Can you share some favorite games from the challenge?
So if you look at the history of the Serious Games Showcase, for example, you'll see that there are a variety of implementations that are quite varied in the way that they work, their mechanics, their experience. So you have a real opportunity to produce things that I think people would get very excited about experiencing. So we don't have this narrow sort of standard aesthetic or standard experience. Instead, we have very varied experiences. And I think that's a good way to get to a wider audience.
Gosh, what are my favorite examples? One year we had 3 games turned in that were for first responders, and they were from various types of companies. So like one was from a very large traditional milsim organization. One was from a smaller, like mid-tier size company, and another one was actually from a school. And you could see that they were all having like the same goals and the same kind of learning outcomes and the same level of like development and interest, but they were taking 3 very different approaches to the same problem, and they had 3 different budget levels and 3 different levels of fidelity, but they had 3 very cool projects that all looked really great next to each other. on the floor. And I think that being able to see that kind of stratus of various types of technology all in one place is kind of like one of the things I really like about the Serious Game Showcase. Some of the things that we have seen from students have been really cool. There was a student game that would teach you how to hear like the location of various sounds, and they were thinking of it as like a fun game for maybe blind people, right? So they were saying, yeah, you can hear sounds and move around. And then various military groups actually got really interested in that game and kind of came in and said, hey, it'd be really great if we could use this technology to help people know where they are on a battlefield based on the sounds they're hearing, and maybe train them with this. And so like seeing that like actual application of something where they thought they were making something just almost just for fun was really cool. On the student side of things, we also had a faster speed of light, which was a game that kept halving the speed, or getting you closer and closer to the speed of light as you played. And so you were moving around this world and you kind of see how physics worked as you move faster and faster. And some of my students actually made Toot and Pooches, which was a game where you like were farting dogs in space, but it taught kids how to use prosthetic arms. And that was one that I thought was really awesome. I really enjoy the games that are fun and interesting, accomplish their goals, and also give me like some extra kind of experience that I'm not seeing in just like the regular games that I can get off the shelf. So if they're using special hardware or making me think about a topic in a way that I hadn't thought of before.
Do you feel that the SGS&C has met the original goals set in 2006? Have the goals changed over time?
Our goal was to not build a conference in a conference and find some way to bring interest and notoriety to serious games within the ITSEC community. Beginning, it was more like, hey, look, games should be taken serious. You know, games are something that can happen. This was a long time ago, so I think even Tickum Gaming might not have been a thing when we first started. So it's been a real long experience getting games from the beginning into where we are today. So I think absolutely the goals are changing. Every company has some sort of serious games part to it now. There's not that what is serious games, or even companies that are just like, we do serious games and that's it. There's a few of those, but it's now a part of, you know, Lockheed Martin. It's a part of any of these large SAIC, Leidos, anybody who is in this space, they have a division that's working on serious games now.
It's awareness and advocacy, but it's becoming awareness of all that the serious game, and not just that serious games has a place within the training potential. And it's all of the different ways within which you can use games and gaming technology to advance training objectives.
At the idea of showcasing that games exist is not really what the challenge is about anymore. I think people know games exist, so now it's more about how do we go from the games that we have now to games that really expand the reach and scope of what could be games in our space.
What do you think we will see for the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge over the next 15 years?
Artificial intelligence is going to be something that is going to be at the forefront of everybody's mind. It is going to be in existence. So decision making is one of the most important things that we need to train in our different warfighters. And, you know, as artificial intelligence, you know, comes to bear, decisions have to be made much more rapidly than they do today. And we need to have an ability to actually practice that and train for that, because it is going to be a different way of conducting business. So I see in that length of time, that's where we need to take the games. And so the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge will be poised to support that into the future. And we just need to be prepared for those kinds of technologies and applications coming forward.
And I think social impact games are one of the spaces that needs continued research and continued development. I think that there's a huge opportunity to reach a wide audience, to help people understand complex issues, everything as sort of mundane as sort of taxes to as complex as how certain scientific situations work, or understanding things like climate change. And I also think that social impact games in particular are the sort of the next level of games efficacy and value in society. So just as we recognize that other media, say film or books, can cover very serious topics, I think generally the expectation is that we need to bring games to sort of the general population of media consumers, and help them understand what unique opportunities arise in offering games that are about serious topics. So while simulation, I think, is generally kind of accepted, people generally recognize that there's a lot of opportunity in serious games, in that this idea of sort of simulating experiences makes sense to them. I think that this idea that we can do things like persuasive play, that we can change people's understanding of complex scenarios, not so much by training them through them, but actually letting them experience it, and perhaps experience it from a variety of perspectives, is one of the more powerful opportunities in creating not just social change, but creating a sort of a more educated population. So I think it's a portion of education as well.
What role does the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge have in shaping the future of advanced serious games at vIITSEC? And what do you think needs to change for serious games to continue to be successful in the future?
What happens a lot is that the new technology that is really coming up in the space is being kind of introduced here, right, through the challenge.
Challenge is morphing with the times. It is evergreen. It's not set in stone as to how it is operated, but it adapts to the types of games and the types of technology that are being used in order to use the serious game as a way to impart training objectives.
So really, to get the things moving forward, I think that what really has to happen is the community has to keep growing like it's been doing, and funders have to get more and more comfortable with actually funding this type of project and this kind of development, understanding what they're actually paying for and what they're going to get for their money. And as that kind of ecosystem starts to really like mature, which it has been over the last 15 years, I think we're going to be able to see people going a little bit further and a little bit further out into what is possible. Keep going. If we just can keep on levels that we've been going at and just don't slow down, in another 15 years, it will be unrecognizably awesome.
Thank you to the participants who shared their perspectives on the evolution of the Serious Games Showcase and Challenge and our industry as a whole. I hope this session has been interesting to you. Remember, this was just one element of our on-demand event. While we are all here at vIITSEC, stop by the Serious Games booth to chat with a member of our organizing committee, and then set aside some time to choose your own path through the rest of our event, to hear our story told from a variety of game developers, early adopters, and sponsors. I invite you to check out the rest of the 15th anniversary retrospective content. Now or later, you can visit our website and head to the vIITSEC tab to access the videos. They will be there long after this event has ended. You'll find 3 focus segments on games. We've grouped them by target audience to make it easier for you to find what interests you: education and training, health, or government and defense. But no one says you shouldn't check out all three. Remember, it's all here on our website. And while you're on there, be sure to head over to contact us to sign up for our newsletter, to keep in touch and learn about how you can join the Showcase and Challenge in 2021.